Hi, I'm Dr. Jeremy Neal. I'm a professor of philosophy at Houston Baptist University. Today I want to talk about Plato, the great ancient Greek philosopher, who lived from 427 to 347 BC. In the dialogue The Euthyphro, we find Socrates, who is Plato's mouthpiece in many of his dialogues, engaged in a discussion with a young man named Euthyphro. The discussion occurs in the courts of law in Athens, and Socrates and Euthyphro are both surprised to see the other there. It turns out Socrates is there in the courts of law because he is being charged with two things. He's being charged with corrupting the youth and also with being impious or disrespectful of the gods. Euthyphro is there in the courts of law because he is charging his father with murder. The backstory for Euthyphro is apparently that his father was a landowner, and that one of his father's hired men killed another hired man. And Euthyphro's father then bound and gagged the murderer and threw him in a ditch. Now Euthyphro is in the courts of law bringing charges of murder against his father. Socrates is surprised at these charges, but Euthyphro says that what he is doing is right. And they fall into a discussion of whether what Euthyphro is doing is pious. Socrates wants to know whether what Euthyphro is doing is pious so that he can defend himself in part against his own interlocutors, the charges he is facing of impiety. At any rate, Euthyphro first defines what is pious as that which he is doing at the time, namely bringing charges of murder against his father. Socrates finds fault with this definition, and they enter into a discussion of some other definitions. Euthyphro ultimately decides that that which is pious because the gods love it. The ancient Greek gods like Zeus, Hera, Athena, Apollo, Hermes, Venus, or Aphrodite by her Greek name. And so Socrates then, in response, poses a dilemma. This is the famous Euthyphro dilemma. Listen up, here's how it goes. Do the gods love that which is pious because it is pious, or is that which is pious because the gods love it? I'm a monotheist. I've grown up in the Christian tradition, and to update what Socrates and Euthyphro are saying, I like to use a slightly different formula in thinking about the Euthyphro dilemma. So Socrates and Euthyphro are discussing piety in a way that suggests they are thinking of piety more or less as what we would call today morality. So to update the Euthyphro dilemma for modern purposes, we can think of it as the following formula. Does God love that which is moral because it is moral, or is that which is moral because God loves it? In other words, does God precede morality causally, or does morality precede God causally? And there are strengths and weaknesses of both views, both horns of the Euthyphro dilemma. The strength of the view that God causally precedes morality is that it enhances God's sovereignty. It appears as though God is kept fully and appropriately sovereign when he precedes morality. The weakness of the view is that it is possible, perhaps, that God could be capricious and could change his mind, and so morality could change. The principles by which we live each day could change. I could wake up tomorrow, you could wake up tomorrow, and murder might be all right, or theft, or lying. On the other horn of the Euthyphro dilemma, there are strengths and weaknesses as well. One strength of the view that God loves that which is moral because it is moral is that we don't have a capricious God. Namely, God couldn't change his mind if the principles of morality causally precede him. At the same time, a weakness of the view is that it appears to undermine God's sovereignty. How could God be sovereign if morality causally precedes him? How could he be omnipotent, which is the way we are taught in the Christian tradition that he is? So both sides of the Euthyphro dilemma then have strengths and weaknesses. In the Christian tradition with which I'm most familiar, the way in which philosophers and theologians at least most philosophers and theologians have attempted to solve the Euthyphro dilemma, is by saying that God and morality are coextensive. Neither precedes the other in a causal sense. So God instantiates within himself and his own character the principles of morality in such a way that he is that which is moral in a very real sense. So thus we have, on this view of things then, a God who can do nothing otherwise than be moral. It would be like a fish trying to breathe out of water, or a human trying to breathe underwater without scuba gear. This is the coextension view. It is the view that I endorse, and it's the dominant view in the Judeo-Christian tradition. So as a response to the Euthyphro dilemma, we don't need to despair, but we can invoke the coextension view and say that God and morality are coextensive with each other.